Well, the day has finally come. The Gus Malzahn era at UCF is officially over. Gus Malzahn resigns to go take the offensive coordinator job at Florida State University. An emergency pod. We talk about it all. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I'm your host, Sean Green. Before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline. This Thanksgiving holiday, why not head to the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting, BetOnline. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with constant real-time odds and action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA and college basketball, NHL, the UFC, and boxing. Head to the website today to see why BetOnline is America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. It's been 24 hours. It's been one of those type of things where a lot has happened. I was filming at 2 a.m., posted the pod at 7 a.m., woke up at like 11:30 to a call from a couple people that was basically telling me that Gus Malzahn might not be here by the end of the day today. So I was on high alert. As you see, no football in the back. The Gus Malzahn signed football is gone. So first thing I want to say is, if anybody has any suggestions on what to put back here,
it's gone.
Let me know. As of right now, it's a Charge On hat.
I think I have an old pair of Dylan Gabriel socks that I can mail your way.
I'm good.
Okay. Okay.
He's kind of a part of that Gus Malzahn era a little bit that leaves a sour taste in the mouth. But listen, I don't know how long this is going to go, but Gus Malzahn has resigned. We're going to kind of talk about what we know, kind of what we've been gatekeeping a little bit. We're going to talk head coaching search and kind of what we've heard. We have some questions that we're going to get to you guys, but I want to throw it to Nick to give his first thoughts. Again, I just saw you 24 hours ago. You drove back to Tampa. I called you 2 times today. One to tell you Gus Malzahn might be fired. The second time to tell you Gus Malzahn has been fired. And now we're here recording this. So how are we feeling tonight?
I don't even know. I got to be honest. I'm still exhausted. It was a long day yesterday in Orlando, and as we record right now, and I know that we're a little late on our emergency pod because I was not expecting this to happen. Not that I wasn't expecting this to happen at some point potentially, but I thought we'd have like a day where it'd be a little bit chill, and maybe like Sunday, if anything, things would heat up. But we both had scheduling conflicts, unfortunately. We were both out of the house right when this news dropped. So we had to wait till we both could get on here. So, yeah, I'll just say, right, we both sort of found this news out a little bit ahead of time. And when I first heard of it originally, I was just like, okay, they're fired. I thought they were just firing him. I'm like, okay, he's being fired. They found a way to pay the money, or they agreed to a reduced buyout or whatever, and we're just going to wait to know those details, right? Because they all matter. And then I'm on Twitter, and I'm just sort of like gathering the reactions of the fan base, and I'm just like refreshing. And I refreshed, and here comes Pete Thamel from ESPN. And I read the tweet, and I'm just like, I was sitting on my couch, and I literally popped up. My eyes got really big. I stood up, and I was like, no effing way. But I actually said the word. And I immediately called you. I was like, what is going on? And you apparently couldn't answer the phone at the time. So you had not even known that this was happening at the moment. So I basically broke that to you. And I was in utter disbelief that of all the ways that this could end, that it was going to end with Gus Malzahn resigning and subsequently taking the job as the offensive coordinator at Florida State. That was not on if I had a bingo board and I had all these options of what it would be, that did not cross my mind. And I don't think it crossed anybody's mind. But listen, Gus Malzahn's no longer the head coach of UCF football. It's crazy that about 24 hours ago, we were just getting news that E.J. Colson, after throwing his first touchdown pass, was entering the portal. And I remember how sort of, I don't want to say angry, but we were pretty bothered by that whole scenario of how that ended last night. And to think that, not even 24 hours later, Gus Malzahn's not even the head coach anymore. It's a crazy timeline that we're on. But, with early signing day coming on Wednesday, that this was going to happen sooner rather than later if it did. And clearly something today, I don't know if the performance yesterday in Utah was just enough for them to say, or whatever happened here, because I'm not really convinced. They can call this resigned all they want. I think we can all sort of read between the lines here of how this all probably transpired, and who knows if that story will ever see the light of day. But I think it absolutely had to happen for the betterment of UCF's program moving forward, for the future of the program. Like we've been saying, I sort of reached a point where I just accepted that as much as I wanted this to work and as much as I believed that Gus Malzahn was the right hire at the time, and I still believe he was. I think Terry Mohajir hiring Gus Malzahn as sort of his first thing that he did at UCF, I think that was the correct move. And I think there were some good things that came out of the Gus Malzahn era. But unfortunately, his time here at UCF is always going to be defined by underachievement relative to the expectations that were set forth, not just by us, but by him himself, and being supposedly a big-time head football coach that was coming to a program that was a hotbed, and all the things he said that he was going to do. And quite frankly, most of that never transpired, and that left a sour taste in most of the fans' mouth. I mean, he lost the fan base. I think that was clear. If you polled every UCF fan, maybe you'd find 5% that would have been in favor of him staying. So ultimately, this is the best decision. This is the best move that could have happened. And the fact that we're under the assumption, we don't have it necessarily confirmed, but we believe that UCF is not on the hook for this buyout whatsoever. In fact, there's a scenario where perhaps Florida State might have to pay a little bit. We don't know, but that's the best case scenario. Gus Malzahn is not the head football coach. We move forward, try to get a new head coach in here as soon as possible. And trust me, it is going to come as soon as possible. So stay ready, everybody. And we're going to stay ready as well, because I'm sure there will be another emergency pod coming here pretty soon. And the fact that they didn't have to pay the buyout money, I think, is fantastic. I think Mike Norvell, God bless him, saved UCF's program a lot of headaches here for the foreseeable future. So that's the good news. But I think it absolutely had to happen, and we were pretty lockstep in that.
Perfectly said. Here's kind of my thought. Look, so like we've said, my favorite word is going to come out, fluid. We've been saying the word fluid for about a month now, and we're privileged because we do this pod. We know a lot of people. We know people that know a lot more than us, and we get told things, and we keep it close to the chest, and we only say kind of what we can say. We've been hearing, Nick, for about a month and a half that there's been talks, there's been negotiations on a potential buyout that was less than the $12 million. I'll come out and say it. We have heard that Terry was talking to multiple coaches. We're going to talk about some of the coaches that UCF might meet with now. But there were coaches that UCF has already met with or had preliminary discussions with a while ago. So when we say fluid, we meant fluid. We didn't know if it was going to happen or not happen. But the point with that being, and kind of where I kind of bring my point to, is if you're Gus Malzahn and the school and you are trying to work on a buyout and trying to figure out if that's the best way to go, don't you think that maybe, just maybe, you're not necessarily feeling the love from that university? You're not feeling the love from the fans when they're chanting "Fire Gus" in your face when you're walking off the field every game. So when we were doing our post-game live show last night, or now, I guess 2 nights ago, and we were flabbergasted about E.J. Colson leaving and how we had kind of heard that Gus Malzahn was going to stay because he's not going to take any less of a buyout and he wants to kind of see this thing through. We were just shocked because we're like, what is there that is positive with this program? And we all said, well, there's 12 million reasons why. And I said, but why would he want to go through that? Why would he? This program is at the bottom of the barrel right now. He's run it into the ground. Why would he want to continue doing this? Because at this point, he's got no future anywhere being a head football coach. Nick said it. I did not see this one coming, and I don't think many people did. I think we heard rumblings this morning that there was some talks, and I think People in the know kind of knew, okay, this actually might happen. But to Nick's point, we didn't think there'd be a savior. And I never thought to say that the savior would be Mike Norvell and the Florida State Seminoles, because
who are also in need of a savior, by the way.
Yeah, I think they think Gus Malzahn is that savior. And I've said it. I have always respected Gus Malzahn, great human being. We continue to say that on that show. There's nobody talking down about Gus Malzahn as a human, as a recruiter. But he has fallen out of time with college football and the way it's kind of gone. And we don't know, to Nick's point, we don't know the buyout, if they're going to pay anything, if UCF basically just said, you know what, Gus, you going to go with Mike Norvell? Sure. Go on, and it'll be a clean clean sweep. I don't think, if I had to guess, I don't think that is the case. I had to assume Florida State is going to pay something, whether it's $6-7 million or a couple. I'm assuming Florida State will pay something, but there's a lot of unknowns right now and how this all played out. But I think the big thought right now is UCF fans are re-energized, happy, excited. And I think for Gus, this gives Gus an opportunity. He, I think, saw the writing on the wall. He didn't feel wanted, and he found another opportunity for him to try to revitalize his career. Because right now, if you looked at it from the outside, his career was kind of going in the tank with how this UCF situation was turning out for him. So, what a crazy 12, 15 hours.
And honestly, it's like I said this last night. It's like, after everything that we've seen, not only this year, but if you throw the entire body of work under the Gus Malzahn regime, what else is there to fall back on? Is what I kept going to. What can you fall back on? And we always said that, well, Gus is getting UCF into the and from a recruiting standpoint, they're in on players who UCF has never been on before, and players that, you know, who knows with the next head coach if you're going to be in on him before, right? But we went through this exercise last week, and the facts is that in year 4 of the Gus Malzahn regime, he's put together the three highest. His three true recruiting classes, 2022, 2023, and 2024, were the 3 highest rated recruiting classes in the history of UCF. And if you look at the roster and you look at the contributors on this team, and most importantly, the high impact contributors on this team, none of those players were coming from these recruiting classes. So what was the point, essentially, of having these top recruiting classes when none of these players really were your high impact contributors on this roster? And if that's what we were falling back on, then again, there's nothing there. Last night, being inside that stadium, I said it, watching that game brought tremendous boredom to me and just disinterest. We all knew that it was a meaningless football game because you had 2 bad football teams that were 4-7 that hadn't won in forever, trying to go out on top to end the season on some sort of high note. But I couldn't have been more disinterested. And then everything that happened with E.J. Colson, that just felt like the final straw. And the fact that in 4 years here, the supposed quarterback whisperer type that Gus Malzahn is could never figure out the quarterback position in 4 years at UCF. He never did. He never figured it out, Sean. Every year that he was here, there was some sort of quarterback controversy. Even in 2021, Dylan gets hurt out in the 3rd game of the season. Okay, you can't predict injuries. But even after that, he goes to Mikey Keene. Then in 2022, after Mikey Keene played pretty well given the circumstances, I thought, in 2021, he brings in John Rice Plumlee. It felt like everybody was on board with the fact that Mikey Keene would probably be the starter. Nope, it ended up being JRP. And then they did the thing where they were going back and forth between him and JRP, and we had like half the fan base was on JRP and half the fan base wanted Mikey Keene, and they couldn't figure that out. And then last year, it was JRP as well, but then he gets hurt, and then Timmy McClain's in there. And in the meantime, Mikey Keene had hit the transfer portal. Tommy Castellanos had hit the transfer portal after they burned his red shirt, and who knows what the hell happened behind the scenes there. I'm pretty sure there's probably a story to that one as well. And then this year, starting not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 quarterbacks, including the guy who you brought in that was like your highest rated quarterback recruit in the history of this program, who we all deemed to be the future, who reclassified as a 17-year-old. I guess is the last time we get to say that, I guess, Sean. And it seemed like he had the inside track to be the starter next year, and he hits the portal. So the most important position on the field was mismanaged, I mean, pretty much from day one under Gus Malzahn. And I'm not saying that's the only issue with his regime, because it's not, but it's a glaring issue that I would argue. And all of this sort of wrapped up in his undoing, and you end up with a 28-24 record in 4 seasons. And that's just simply, to me, not good enough. Not good enough for a head coach who had the pedigree that he did coming in and everything that he sold everybody on when he first came in.
Yeah, I think the record in the Big 12 is 5-14 against,
and I
Big
believe
12
7-18 against Power 5, Power 4 opponents.
Yeah. So, listen, this is what the people wanted. I think this is what everybody kind of needed to happen. Even when we heard that Gus was probably going to stay, there was this lull for us, because we knew for the next 9 months, you have to try and find some positives to keep yourself sane. I mean, to keep...
I wasn't going to do it. I was not going to come on here and fake it and try to give you and spin you some positivity and try to tell you that everything was okay. And I'm glad we don't have to do that.
Yeah.
I'm glad we don't have to do that. I'm glad that the Band-Aid has been completely ripped off and thrown in the garbage can, never to be seen from again. I'm glad that we are at that point.
And again, credit to Gus. I mean, it's no harm, no foul. He did run this program into the ground, and for that, he will never be. And I have seen some things about people saying that Gus viewed UCF as a stepping stone job. He never wanted to stay at UCF. I've heard a couple people say that. I don't buy that at all.
No, I don't.
I don't buy that at all. I think Gus Malzahn wanted to be remembered at UCF as the coach that brought UCF into that national spotlight, that national power consistently. I do not get the vibe at all that Gus was using this to get a better job at any point. I think at some point, though, and I kind of mentioned this, especially within the last month or two, I think he saw the writing on the wall. And this was the thing I said. You're going to be on a year-to-year basis. I think I mentioned this on a pod, Nick. You're on a year-to-year basis. Even if you have a 9-win season, a 10-win season, what is the UCF, athletic department going to say? Great. Now you need to do it again. And if he didn't do it again, he was going to be fired the next year. So for Gus, it's like, why would you want to stay in that environment? Not saying it was all, like, at the end of the day, you had a $12 million buy you couldn't afford. But for Gus, it's like, for him, this is a move to go to Florida State, try and revitalize his career, try and give himself an opportunity to be a head coach again, potentially, and fix Florida State's offense for the time being. But to get away from UCF, where it just did not work out, and it was not going to work with the track it was on.
Yeah, I think the head coach career of Gus Malzahn, that ship has sailed, in my opinion. I think he's older now. I think you could clearly see that he was a bit. I thought visibly he looked worn out by the whole job. I thought he did. And
then why do you take an OC job? Like he clearly, and Gus Malzahn called
because
like Gus Malzahn is the type. Nick, Gus Malzahn is the type, and I think we don't know him personally. Gus Malzahn believes himself to be a very smart man in the college football landscape, which I'm not saying he's not. He wants a head coach job at some point. You don't make this move. If I was him, if I didn't want to be a head coach again, I would retire. I'd go sit on a beach for a year, and then I'd go do TV. His viewpoint is, I'm going to go take this job, reset the FSU offense, and then in this next cycle, some job that I want is going to open up, and I'm going to get an offer for.
We'll see. You may be right. You may be right. I just think that Gus Malzahn is going to do now what he has aspired to do, what he essentially did at Auburn when he was winning all those games, and that is he's the play caller. He gets to call plays. He gets to focus on that part of it, and that's it. One side of the ball. The problem is I think his play calling abilities have sort of waned as the years have gone on. I think we saw that
basically his entire time here.
Right. So again, but that's Florida State's problem to figure out. It's no longer UCF's, but Yeah, I think that's we'll see what happens with Gus Malzahn's future. But the other part of this too, and we already saw it, and this was going to happen, and nobody should freak out about this. UCF is already losing recruits on their already very small class. You're already seeing a lot of recruits put out ominous messages, if you will, about what happens, and that stuff happens all the time. It's social media. I really don't pay much attention to that stuff, but you're going to see recruits like Chaston Brown was the first one, I believe, to decommit. I think there was a 2026 kid who decommitted. You're probably going to see stuff like that happen, and you're probably going to see a certain bit of this roster as well hit the portal, and that's normal. And I would just say to the fan base, I wouldn't get upset about it if a player that you really like ends up going to the portal, because in my opinion, it's worth it. It is absolutely worth it to take the short-term losses over what I think was going to be a long-term issue, and that would have been keeping Gus Malzahn on staff and continuing to prolong this and sort of being stuck in first gear and not going anywhere. So I'll just say that on that part of it, because that has also started since this announcement happened.
Yeah, it's a part of college football, and at the end of the day, Gus Malzahn and his staff recruited a lot of these guys. They don't know who the next staff is. And you do see some times where, like, you look at Arizona, right? And most of that roster stayed pretty intact. But to be fair, and this is why I asked about positives in last night's pod, what is there right now that is a clear-cut positive that you would feel really upset about a player leaving? Or, like, for me right now, you need a hard reset. UCF is doing that. UCF gets that opportunity. I think there's a couple players right now that are in the freshman class that I would be nervous about decommitting, that being Javon Boggs, Tavion Swint. Those are kind of the guys that I look at as difference makers in terms of UCF's offense, but whoever's coming in did not recruit these players. So that's going to be a wait and see. And Nick, I do think that's going to be coming pretty soon. Obviously, when they hire the new head coach, they're going to be trying to recruit like hell to keep some of these guys. But at the same time, you're doing a hard reset for a reason. When you fire a head coach, it's clearly for a reason. So to Nick's point, I would say you're going to see a lot of this over the next couple days. Don't freak out. Who knows what the future holds? Do you want to talk about head coaching candidates, or do you want to have anything else to say on? I feel like we didn't talk much about. We did talk a good chunk, but Gus Malzahn leaving is something that we've talked about for the last. Yeah, we've been sort of talking about this, so I feel like we've already said a lot of our pieces throughout the season. But all I'll say, I guess to try to sum this all together, it's like, and I've said this multiple times, me and you were both at Gus Malzahn's first press conference when he was hired as UCF's head coach, replacing Josh Heupel. And at the time, I was a student reporter covering the team. It was sort of my first, experience getting to see all this stuff happen. And Gus Malzahn aced the press conference, and it was fantastic. He sold you on his vision. Terry Mahadra did as well, and you really thought that UCF, which was at that point, I think, still an ascending program in the Group of Five, and you felt like they were going to go to the next level. And everything he said about, we're going to recruit like our hair's on fire. We're going to put a, what did he say? A force field or whatever around the city of Orlando. And we're going to hit that part hard, and we're going to win football games. And we believe that if the right guy is in place at this university, that you can turn it into a true, one of the national powers. And I think time proved that Gus Malzahn just simply is not that coach. And I do believe that given the right head coach at this school, even though right now it seems like things are very bleak, I still think you can make a lot of really good things happen. It was never going to happen under Gus Malzahn. He was the right hire at the time. I think the process of that, like I said, was correct in what Terry Mahadra did. And, the most important thing probably that happened during his regime was you earned a Big 12 invite. That happened. Do you get that without Gus Malzahn and the credibility that he brought to the school? I don't know. Probably yes, but I'm sure it helped. And he was here for that. So, we saw some players go to the NFL during his time here. We saw some outstanding players come in.
RJ Harvey, the emergence of him, we talked a lot about him and everything that he did in the 3 years that he was playing under Gus Malzahn. So there were some positives, but unfortunately, I think the negatives outweighed that, and expectations were not met. And that goes back to the first 2 years in the AAC. If you go back and look at those 2 first years in the American, UCF should have won the American. Maybe not 2021, Cincinnati, clearly. I mean, they went to the playoff. And Dylan Gabriel got hurt. So maybe that season turns out differently. But even like 2022, Sean, that team still managed to lose 5 games. And I would argue that they were the most talented team in the group of 5, probably that season. If you go back and look at the roster and some of the numbers they were putting up, they should not have lost 5 football games like they did. So it was just expectations not met, and that's sort of what led us here. So we can transition now to the where does UCF go from here part of this show, and that's going to bring us to these head coaching candidates, which I know that you're going to list now.
Yeah, and I will say, just also to close it out in a quick thing, at least you're not searching for a new AD. If you remember the last search, you had to hire a new AD, and then the new AD had to hire a new head coach. And if you remember, UCF still kept a majority of their roster intact during that cycle. So I would say for those maybe nervous about the roster and nervous about losing guys, I wouldn't fret too much about that. I think Terry's going to do a good job. I know maybe some people are nervous about that. I do think that the due diligence has been done, and I think they're going to hire the right guy, which is what we're leading into now. Now, you guys asked a couple of questions. I did put out a tweet. Like I said, we're recording this late, so you're seeing this the day after this all happened. But I asked you guys, and I said, drop any questions you have below. And obviously, one of the main questions was, one of the questions from @Knights_407 was, is Tulane or Texas State coach top of your wish list? And is Dion even at play at all? Which kind of leads us into the coaching talk. Another person at Dr. Jose Pan says, how do you feel about a Frost return? Cons, pros. So this is where we're going to talk about it. I think there's a couple names. If I had to guess, and this is without any real inside information, I have things I can say that I've not gotten approval to say in terms of who UCF has talked to over the last month and a half. All I will say is this. There's one really big name out there that everybody wants in terms of head coaching candidates, and that is John Summerall from Tulane. If you do research on John Summerall, played at Kentucky, was the head coach at Troy, won 2 conference championships with them at Troy, went 23-4. Now with Tulane, obviously took over for Willie Fritz when Willie Fritz went to Houston. He's now, I think they're 9-3, Nick, right? 9-3. So brought Tulane to a 9-3. They're going to play for an American Conference Championship to make it 3 straight conference championships in a row for John Summerall. And we'll talk pros and cons for all of these. I'm just going to list out kind of who, if I'm thinking the next guy to get hired, these are who I'm thinking. John Summerall, 1. G.J. Kinney was the OC for Gus in his first year at UCF. That was the 8-4 year where they beat Florida in the bowl game. Well, technically 9-4 because they did beat Florida. Obviously didn't call plays at UCF, but then went to Texas State. Has had winning seasons for, I think, every year he's been there. Maybe not the first one, but I think he's had winning seasons the first couple of years he's been there. Kind of revitalized that program. They just gave him a big contract extension. We'll again talk about kind of how that impacts UCF. So I say G.J. Kinney, number 2. Those are my top 2. And not so much that I'm looking at, but those are the names that everybody's talking about. And you should be. Some under the radar names: Jamie Chadwell, Liberty, Dan Mullen, ESPN analyst now, Dan Mullen. And then Scott Frost is the kind of the fun name that people like to throw out to bring back Scott Frost.
Can I start there?
You can. And I'm going to let everybody know before Nick starts. Me and him have been talking behind the scenes on a lot of these candidates because now we get an opportunity to talk. We actually have not talked about how we feel about any of these candidates because we were like, we sparred we said we're not going to talk about it on air. We'll talk about it off air because it's just going to make us go crazy. We feel very differently about a lot of these candidates. So with that, I will give you the floor on Scott Frost.
Yeah, get that thought out of your heads, people. I understand. I do. I completely understand. You have great memories with Scott Frost. He brought you to an undefeated season where you beat Gus Malzahn's Auburn Tigers in the Peach Bowl. I understand all that. That was 2017. We are in the year of our Lord, 2024, moving into 2025. Okay, we are pushing on 8 years since Scott Frost has been the head coach of UCF. Very rarely does the second act ever appropriately follow the first. Scott Frost has been out of college football for 2 complete seasons. Scott Frost went to Nebraska and was there for 5 seasons, or 4 and 3 games in his before he was fired. And he won 16 games at Nebraska. 16. Scott Frost in 7 seasons as a head coach has 1 winning season, actually, and that being the 13-0 team. Not taking anything away from Scott Frost and the job he did. The landscape of college football since the time he was here at UCF and to what it is now is completely different. The way Scott Frost probably coached then is just nowhere near what he would have to be as a coach now. We have no evidence that he's fit to do that. So this whole narrative that I'm hearing about get the band back together and bring back so-and-so as an assistant, I am not in favor of that whatsoever. I'm really not. Not when UCF right now, the only 2 Power 4 openings as we speak are UCF and North Carolina. That's it. And from everything you hear right now, I think Chris Vanini from The Athletic put it out there that UCF was a job that a lot of people were sort of waiting to see if it was going to open because there was going to be a lot of interest. You are one of 2 Power 5 jobs that are currently open at the moment. And I truly believe that if you get the right guy in here that is fully committed, that you can turn this thing into something special. I truly still believe that is on the table. Going after Scott Frost does not exactly excite me when I bring all that up and you bring up all the other head coaching candidates who are out there, and there are a lot of them and a lot of quality coaches as well who are doing this right now in the current landscape of college football. And that matters to me, Sean. That matters to me that you're doing it in the current landscape because the sport is completely different than what it was when Scott Frost was last here at UCF. So that's all I'll say about Scott Frost. And there's no ties. Nobody here at this university has any ties to Scott Frost anymore on top of that.
So Scott Frost will be a no for Nick.
Yes, and you're going to tell everybody how he's a yes for you. I know.
No, I agree with everything you said. I think for me, and I think you guys are going to hear me a lot. I tried to keep a lot of my preferences close to the chest, but now I can say it. I think UCF needs a coach that's going to stay. That was the issue for years playing coaching carousel because you hired really good up-and-coming coaches that, yes, turned UCF around, made them the program they are today, but better jobs came calling. Not saying that it was right or wrong as a better job. I think Scott Frost would probably now agree that Nebraska wasn't necessarily the better job in the grand scheme of things for him personally. I think you need a coach like Gus in terms of somebody that is going to view the program as I can stay here, not look at any other job, and get this program into the top of college football. I think when you get into the route of hiring the up-and-coming coordinator, the hot coaching commodity, not saying it's about a hire. Those are really great hires, and they'll probably do really good at UCF. But you do run the risk in the future, and I know it's getting ahead of myself, but you do run the risk of it becoming UCF 2017, 2018 all over again, where you need to make the right hire, and then you might need to make another right hire right behind that person. So the thing that's going for Scott Frost is Scott Frost would not leave UCF. He left UCF at a time he shouldn't have. He now knows that. He loves the university. I don't think he would leave. With that being said, I don't think UCF is contacting Scott Frost. So for all the people that want Scott Frost and are hoping for it to happen, I have not heard anything about Scott Frost getting contacted. I might be wrong on that. I don't think he's a candidate. So unfortunately, we can move past Scott Frost and kind of focus on some other guys. I know somebody mentioned Dion. Dion is not coming to UCF. I get
mentioned that?
I think it's not just this comment. I have seen that on a good chunk of some UCF fans, and not just UCF fans, but college football fans thinking, oh, is Deion going to go back to a Florida school? I understand where people are coming from. I do get that. Deion's not going to leave Colorado. He's kind of started to build that up. And I think the only job that Deion would leave for would be kind of an SEC level job. Not saying, again, that I think UCF is, in Gus's words, a gold mine. It's in Florida. I think you can really get UCF to be one of the best teams, if not the best teams in the Big 12. But Deion is not leaving. So those are the quick two. Let's talk GJ Kinney. We'll do John Summerall last. Dan Mullen, who I don't see them doing Dan Mullen after what they did with Gus. I like Dan Mullen. Nick doesn't. If news comes out that UCF is meeting with Dan Mullen, we'll talk about it. But I don't want to get into like a 10-minute conversation of why I like Dan Mullen and why Nick doesn't. If they meet with him, we'll talk about it. But Dan Mullen, I wouldn't mind it. Nick would hate it. Let's talk GJ Kinney. A lot of players today, Nick, were coming out in support of GJ Kinney. I mentioned, obviously, UCF's OC, first year under Gus. Didn't call plays, but now at Texas State, he has gone 14-9 at Texas State in his 2 seasons, including back-to-back bowl appearances. Obviously, really good offensive coach. He would be the type of hire that UCF has gone after, basically for the last couple head coaching searches. So here's the positives and negative in my book, and I want to hear your thought. Positive, I think a lot of players that are on the roster still and former players love GJ Kinney. I think GJ Kinney understands, and even at his 1 year at UCF, just how kind of UCF operates, and he's not coming in blind to what UCF. He's not coming in like Gus, not knowing anything about UCF besides playing it. GJ Kinney worked here, knows kind of what to expect, knows a lot of former alumni, which I think is going to be important, had recruited in the state with UCF. And I think his offense is a really good offense. Here's my negatives. Number one, how much is his buyout? Texas State just gave him a new 7-year deal at $2 million per year annually. Don't know if UCF's going to be able to, and again, I don't know the buyout numbers. I don't know if UCF would be willing to buy him out of a 7-year contract to come be the head coach here. And then number two, Texas State they had a high expectation this year, fell short of it. It's still impressive for what he's done at Texas State, but he hasn't done, in my opinion, he hasn't done enough on that level to make it scream to me he's the guy. Not saying he can't be the guy, but I don't think what I've seen out of his Texas State teams, it screams to me this dude can come win a Big 12 championship in the next 2 years. But I do like GJ Kinney. I'd be happy with the hire, and I think he would be able to recruit the state. I just don't know with the buyout and what he's done at Texas State, albeit with a lot less talent. I don't know if UCF will go after it, but I would like the hire. Nick, your thoughts?
Yeah, Kenny is on the short list, and it has to do with the fact that, number one, he was here already. He was one of Gus's first hires, if I'm not mistaken, was bringing in GJ Kinney. So there's already a little bit of familiarity there, and clearly he's done a really good job at Texas State, going 14-10 over his 2 seasons, and then obviously going 12-2 before that at Incarnate Ward. He's 35 years old. He feels fresh. He feels exciting. He feels new. He's offense. UCF usually loves historically they love to go the offensive route. So he checks all those boxes for sure. But the thing I will say, it's like, I think Ricky Barber was the first person to sort of tweet out that GJ Kinney should be the man for the job. And for what it's worth, Ricky Barber will obviously not be here next year. But if this is a player thing that they would like to see GJ Kinney, it sort of reminds me of Jeff Lebby back in 2021. Maybe not to that extent. That was pretty wild. In 2021, where you had everybody on that team felt like it was pretty open about Jeff Lebby. And they did not do that. And I think they were proven right not to go in that direction, by the way. I do. So that's sort of where I'm at with GJ Kinney. The concerns about, has he done enough to warrant a job at this level? I mean, we really just don't know. We really don't know until we see him in that sort of environment. But I think he's a head coach that is starting to gain a lot of steam on the market, and he's definitely going to get a look. He's definitely going to get a look.
And it would not shock me if UCF went that direction. I think he can win at this level. I think if Baylor fired Dave Aranda, obviously I think he's a Baylor alum.
Well, Dave Aranda has saved his job.
He saved his job. And I think if that Baylor job ever opened up, Baylor would want GJ Kinney. Not saying he would leave UCF for Baylor just because of that.
Keep in mind too, and this goes not just for Kinney, but for all these head coaches, by UCF not having to pay the buyout, and the fact that you're really only going up against North Carolina at the moment in terms of Power 4 jobs that are open. I mean, I don't think North Carolina has spent big historically. Like, who's to say UCF, if they were getting into a bidding war with one of those, I don't think there's much differentiating between, which job is better, North Carolina or UCF. UCF, by not having to pay Gus's buyout, like, theoretically, you'd think, like, hey, they have money to spend. If they have to get into a little bit of a bidding war, like, they have that money to spend. So that's just a general point. But you can continue.
Well, and that's a good point, because at Jack Harris 2003 said, is UCF a more attractive job than UNC? I think to the general public, I think you could see two sides to it. I think if you really think about it, UCF is the more attractive job. And I think college football insiders would probably agree with you. I think to the general public that doesn't understand, North Carolina compared to Central Florida, and it's no disrespect, UCF, I'm just saying to the general public, UCF, UNC, most people are picking UNC. But in terms of football and in terms of college football right now, and this is not a bias take, I think both jobs are really good jobs. I think UCF is the better job right now. Specifically, you could take out all of the bias, all of the program to the tradition. It's where the school's located. One is a Power 4 school in Florida, and one is a Power 4 school in North Carolina. Which, if you're a head coach that wants the new job, which job would you want?
Well, couple things. We don't know the future of the ACC. That's to be determined. North Carolina under Mac Brown was able to recruit pretty well. In fact, I think there was a year, maybe 2021, where they actually had the top recruiting class in the ACC. But still, with that being said, as long as the ACC is going as currently constructed, you're always going to be probably playing behind Miami. You're going to be playing behind Clemson. On most years, Florida State, if they ever decide to get it together. So it's a little bit more difficult, I would say. Whereas in the Big 12, the schools in the Big 12 aren't exactly recruiting hotbeds, essentially. Like Colorado can obviously go out there and has the ability under Deion to land anybody they want if they want to. But Deion doesn't exactly operate that way, right? He's doing his own unique thing. We've seen Texas Tech put together some top 30, some top 25 classes here and there. We've seen TCU do the same thing, but maybe Arizona State has the ability to do that as well with Kenny Dillingham. But I feel like there's less schools that truly have the ability to do that. I think UCF does have the ability to do that because I've seen them do it. And before this went off the rails this year, UCF was tracking to have, a top 25 class. So I think we've already seen that it can be done. So in terms of comparing them, like if you want to say that one's better than the other, I don't think it sways one way or the other like substantially.
No, for sure. And they're both big jobs. And to be honest, I think all the head coach or all the coaches that are vying for these jobs view them both as big time jobs. And I think anybody that starts firing their head coaches in the Power 4, I find it very hard to believe you're going to find a bigger job than these two right now. So that's what GJ Kinney, and that's what we think on the UCF UNC debate. But I do, from what I have heard from some of, and again, I don't know this for sure, I would assume that most of these candidates would want the UCF job. And I think college football insiders have kind of alluded to that now that the UCF job is open, that a lot of college football coaches that are looking for that next opportunity are wanting the UCF job. So we talked about GJ Kinney. Barry Odom. We can bring up Barry Odom. Steven kind of mentioned him.
Barry Odom.
Barry Odom. What he's done at UNLV this year, with all of the drama early in the year with Sluka, to bring UNLV to where they are this year at a 9-2 or 10-2 year, and vying for a conference title and potentially a college football playoff berth, nothing short of incredible. Barry Odom's done an incredible job there. Positives and negatives. There is something physical there with him, kind of what he's done at UNLV. When he was at Missouri, there was a lot to be said. There's a reason he got fired at Mizzou. You're kind of going around the same route of the Gus Malzahn, former SEC head coach that was fired. The only difference was that Gus took UCF after Auburn and Barry Odom took UNLV, and he kind of turned UNLV back around. So I want to know what the buyout was for Barry Odom. I like Barry Odom. He would definitely not be my first choice, in my opinion. But I think if UCF hired Barry Odom, I don't think that's an awful choice. My only thing would be you're kind of doing the same thing that we'd be talking about Dan Mullen, whereas you're hiring a former SEC head football coach that got fired to now come run your program.
Yeah, Odom to me is sort of the wild card here. I think he's the wild card because he's not a flashy name necessarily. He's not the first name that typically comes to mind in this sort of thing, but he's definitely earned the respect of many for the job that he's done at UNLV, which has been a tough place to win, and he's turned it into a winner. When you go 10-2, you mentioned sort of the turmoil that they had to deal with inside that program this year, and he was able to keep that team together, and he's done a good job. He's right there, like in the prime of his coaching years. You mentioned he has the experience at Missouri. He was a defensive coordinator at Arkansas. They were a top 40 unit in 2021, I believe it was, under him. The buyout details, this is actually funny because as we're recording at the moment, the clock or the calendar just flipped over to December 1st. If Odom had left this is from the Las Vegas Review-Journal about his buyout because he signed an extension earlier this year. If he left for a college Power 4 NFL head coaching job before December 1st, 2024, UNLV would be owed $4 million. That number reduces by $1 million each year before reaching $500,000 if he leaves before December 1st, 2028. So, doesn't sound like it's a huge buyout to have to pay. There's obviously a lot worse to go around if you wanted to go down that route. But I would say, like, Barry Odom to me, like, if I know the fan base, like I think I know the fan base, there probably wouldn't be a lot of people throwing pom-poms in the air. No. It wouldn't be that type of hire. Not saying it would end up being a good hire, but I feel like that's where it would probably be the reaction to that. And I will say he's a defensive guy, and that would be kind of interesting to see because UCF has struggled to play defense at a high level for a long time. So if you try to get somebody that has a sort of prowess and an expertise on that side of the ball, that would be sort of interesting if they want to go down that route. But like you said, he would not necessarily be my first candidate, but he's on the list.
Also, Josh Heupel was his OC at Mizzou, if we remember that. So, and then once Josh Heupel left, kind of what happened to Barry Odom at Missouri. So, again, I think I agree with you. It's kind of the under the radar, kind of wild card candidate, defensive coach. Didn't even talk about that, he is more of a defensive minded head coach. And kind of to the last one that we're going to talk about today, which is, I think, number one on my board, number one on Nick's board, number one on basically every head coaching board in the country right now. We mentioned his name off the top, John Sumrall. We kind of told you, I've already told you, was at Troy, was now at Tulane. He's lost in 3 years. He's lost 7 football games in 3 years at Troy and Tulane combined. Positives and negatives. Positives, he wins a lot of games, especially the last 3 years as a head football coach.
Look up his Wikipedia, folks.
Yeah.
Google him.
Google, because listen, nobody knew John Sumrall's name in terms of Power 4 until basically to this year. People knew him at Troy. He took the Tulane job. He's turned that team around. The team loves him. I think I think John Summerall would have he'd be able to turn the UCF program around pretty quickly. And I know you don't want to put pressure on a head coach like that, but he's proven that he can really get the most out of his players. He took over a Tulane team that was kind of spiraling at the end with Willie Fritz. And he came in and brought them basically right back to where they were with Willie Fritz. So I think it was impressive what he did. There are some factors. Number one, and this is what did I say before? What is my number one factor? It's how long are they going to stay? Are they going to want to stay and build it at UCF? And this is the negative. I think he's the best candidate. If UCF hired John Summerall, the entire country would be like, watch out for UCF. I think Nick would agree with me on that. Because everybody was thinking, oh, he might want the UNC job. I think he wants the UCF job. That's just what I think. I think John Summerall is a Kentucky alum. He is a Kentucky alum. And Kentucky has spiraled over the last couple of years. Obviously, Stoops is there. You don't know what goes on with there. Nobody thinks Stoops will get fired back at Kentucky. Whenever that job opens up, he's gone. Kentucky will be, if he continues this rise and he continues doing what he's doing at these programs, if he gets hired at UCF and turns UCF into what we think UCF can be turned into, John Summerall is gone the minute Kentucky opens up. Also, John Summerall is a defensive coach, so what Nick alluded to, it would be kind of going off the beaten path of what UCF usually does, which maybe they need to. Maybe they do. Maybe they need to go defensive coach and hire an OC, right? So I think it'd be the pros. This is my pro. He's the best coach on the market right now that I think can turn UCF around the quickest. The negative, he's probably a coach that is not going to stay at UCF for the long haul. He will come, he will make it better, and then the minute a good job opens up, he's gone. So you kind of, you're a UCF fan, you have to choose. Do you want the head coach that's probably going to want to stay and build it with you? Or do you want the head coach that's probably going to build it quicker? You're going to get really good probably pretty fast, but then we'll leave you the minute a better job opens up. So, Nick, I'll give you the floor on John Summerall.
Yeah, I think Summerall, I think he's as perfect as a candidate as you could possibly ask for at the moment. I think he's number one on my board. He's been number one on my board ever since I started to acknowledge the fact that I didn't think Gus Malzahn was fit to continue as head coach of UCF. The guy's a winner, and I respect the coaches. I like the coaches who went to who were at the programs that were sort of lesser, didn't have the resources, and especially in this new age of college football that he's been able to do it in as well. 2022 to now 2024, not having those resources at the school that he's at and still being able to win football games and figure it out. At 42 years of age, he's like that. He's, again, kind of like Odom. He's like right there entering the prime of his coaching career. It seems like there's a lot of upside there. I don't know. Like you said, there's always the Kentucky factor there. I don't know. At the moment, I can't really worry about that. I have to worry about hiring the best candidate possible. And I think Summerall would be that guy. We'll see what he would be able to put around him, and we don't know the buyout numbers. It seems like that's been pretty tight-lipped at the moment, but obviously he just signed the extension.
I think Tulane's a private.
Because Tulane's a private school. I'm probably going to assume that it's going to be higher than what Barry Odom's was at UNLV. But if you feel like that's the guy, you probably go out to try to get him, because that's a guy that certainly is at the top of North Carolina's list. That's a guy where, when in terms of a bidding war, in terms of trying to compete against that school, I think John Summerall is probably the common factor there of who you'd be going after. But he, to me, would be as good of a hire as you could possibly do.
I think he's probably, for any school in the Power Four that would be losing their head coach, I think John Summerall is probably at the top of the list for all of them. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think whatever school hires him, you need to make sure that buyout is really nice, just in case. But I think in terms of who do me and Nick want, John Summerall is number one. I think if you got him, if you won the bidding over North Carolina and he comes to UCF, I think it's a home run. And I think UCF is in a brighter place. And I think they're in a brighter place regardless of who you hire. But I think it's a clear-cut, huge huge hire for UCF if they get him, and I think the college football world would agree with it.
Not to mention, I've been keeping my eye on that Tulane roster. And as we know, because it's going to happen here at UCF, there's going to be an exodus of players. If John Sumrall gets hired away, and let's just say for hypothetical sake that it is at UCF, there's going to be players that leave. And I look at that roster, Sean, I see there's a lot of good talent there on both sides of the ball that I would be highly interested in. Highly interested in. And even if you go to the offensive side of the ball, and I know that's not obviously the side that he necessarily works on, but I mean, hey, they got a pretty good freshman quarterback. Pretty good freshman quarterback in Darian Mensah. Pretty good running back, by the way. And UCF, as we know, needs a running back. Mekhi Hughes, who as a freshman last year, over 1,300 yards. And this year, he had over 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns too, and he's only a sophomore. So there's some players on that roster too that I would be highly interested in if they were making that move with him as well. Because we have no idea who's going to be throwing passes for UCF next year. But I'm probably going to bet that he's not on the roster right now.
Yeah, he's definitely not on the roster. Just want to throw this out there. If DJ Kinney somehow gets the job, could Tommy Castellanos be the quarterback at UCF once again?
No. Let's move on.
Nick.
What is it with all of y'all in your reunions?
It's not the reunion. Texas State, he's probably going to Texas State right now. So if GJ Kinney becomes the coach at UCF, you can safely assume that the quarterback that GJ Kinney was going after is probably going to follow GJ Kinney where he goes. So there's a world where Tommy Castellanos, if UCF goes through their hiring process and GJ Kinney is the coach, which I wouldn't mind, Tommy Castellanos might be coming back to UCF. That's all I'm saying. Don't have any inside information on that. I'm just saying I'm reading between the lines. So I think me and Nick's board right now, I would say probably number 1, John Sumrall, number 2, GJ Kinney, and number 3 for me is Dan Mullen. Number 3 for Nick, you probably say Barry Odom.
I would say number 1 for me is Sumrall. Mm-hmm. Number 2 is GJ. Number 3 for me is actually Jamie Chadwell. Number 3 for me is, and Jamie Chadwell is a guy that's been mentioned a lot, and he sort of, to me, is kind of like Sumrall, but with even more of a body of work, because he's been a head coach going back to his Division II days at North Greenville, where he won a lot of football games. He was then at Delta State. He goes to Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern is not an easy place to win football games. He won 35 of them in 4 years. And then Coastal Carolina, 39 wins there in 5 seasons. And then obviously the success he's had at Liberty, 21-4 in 2 seasons with Liberty.
Did just lose to Sam Houston.
Yeah, I'm aware. I like
one
Jamie data Chadwell. Point. It's one data point.
I like Jamie Chadwell.
Jamie Chadwell for me would be on the list at number 3. I'd probably slot Odom at 5 or 4 rather. Dan Mullen is nowhere near my list. Just nowhere near.
But here's the thing. That's why I'm not going to say why I like Dan Mullen.
Yeah,
if Dan Mullen is interviewed and it gets announced that he was interviewed,
and
I will give my take on it.
And I'll also mention some of these other names, Sean. But these are very prolific. These are probably not going to happen. But this is just the sleepers. This is the sleeper category, and I don't know how much you even know about these guys. I'm not going to go too deep into them, but I'm going to mention their names. One being Buster Faulkner, who is the offensive coordinator right now at Georgia Tech. I think he's done a really good job there. He was under Kirby Smart for a few years as well. So in fact, Georgia might make the hire and get him back as the OC next year, to be honest with you. But he's a name that I would throw out there. Another guy is Bob Chesney. Another guy who has had a lot of head coaching jobs, but it might be too early for him because he was at Assumption College, then he was at Holy Cross where he won a lot of games, and then of course this year he's the head coach at James Madison. He took over for Kurt Cignetti. I thought it was pretty telling that Cignetti went to Indiana and he brought a lot of the players that he won with at JMU with him. So it feels like Chesney kind of had to start from the ground up, and he still was able to win 8 games. But it might be a little too early. You probably want to see more of a sample size there at James Madison. But those are some of the proliferary names that I would put in the sleeper category for now.
Yeah. We'll see. It's all very fluid, which is our favorite word of the year here on Charge On. Final thoughts. I don't think we need to give many final thoughts. This was probably one of our longest podcasts of the year. Well, I'll find out when I edit it. But that's basically your deep dive. We'll get more into it on our episode this week, which I don't know when our episode's going to be this week, because when news drops, we're going to be dropping a pod.
And it's going to be coming. Like I said earlier, everybody better be on high alert because early signing day is coming. We are 7 days away from the portal opening. It's going to be wild. It's going to be hectic. I'm going to be sitting back with my feet laid up, and I can't wait to digest all this. That's the part. It's like you never hate to have to fire a head coach or have a head coach leave, but it's exciting in a weird way. I hate that we're like saying that because there's people that are losing their jobs everywhere, but there's an exciting factor to it. There's a newness factor to it. So it is what it is. Let's also, to bring it back, Gus Malzahn, no longer the head coach of UCF football. If I had a beer, I would toast. All I have is water right now in a cup. So I'll have a slurp here of my water real quick as we ring 10 bells for Gus Malzahn's career at UCF. Is that harsh? Is that too harsh?
I don't think it is. I also do want to say, somebody did ask a question about who we want to see maybe be kept on the staff moving forward at Z Dadouche. I don't know if I'm saying that last name correctly, but here's the couple names. Cam Martin needs to be kept on staff. That's kind of why I want GJ. Like, GJ Kinney would be a really good hire because him and Cam are really close. Cam Martin is one of the best recruiters in the country. He needs to be kept on staff with whoever is coming in. I think if you lose him, you do lose, in my opinion, your best recruiter. I mean, he's only recruited the best running backs in the country. He needs to stay on staff. Trovon Reed, I think, needs to be kept on staff. Kenny Martin needs to be kept on staff if they want to. Besides that, I'm good with
clean house.
Besides that, clean house. But those three guys, I think, they've proven that they're your best guys on staff in terms of recruiting, in terms of development. I mean, the running backs alone have been the best developed, obviously, on the roster. So I would say those are the names if we had to say. I know that was at the end of the pod, but just want to throw that out there as guys that I'd be okay and want to see return. But also, when you hire a new coach, nothing's a foregone conclusion. All right, that's going to do it for this emergency pod. A much longer emergency pod than usual for emergency podcasts are concerned, but crazy times. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. This is a lot better circumstances than we thought we were going to have to do for the month of December. So
and can we please have a quiet Sunday? I would love to enjoy the NFL Week 13 slate, especially while I'm working. I would love for that to just let's not have any news. We want to drop all this stuff on Monday, knock yourselves out. But
I'm golfing. I mean, I'm golfing today. It's today. We're dropping this today. I'm golfing today at 10:50.
Well, if anything happens, I hope you know that you're going to have to pull over on hole number 8, and you're going to have to do an emergency live thoughts because we don't. Because I have a feeling that something's happening. It's going to happen very soon. It has to happen very soon. And also, we didn't mention it, but I'm pretty confident that some of the legwork for these coaching candidates has probably been done at this point. I have to think that this has been long understood by this administration of where they were going. So we all know conversations take place through back channels and things like that. So it's just probably a matter at this point of ironing out contracts and things like that. So
going to be interesting. I think we'll find out fairly quickly. Hopefully I'm not on a plane. I'm going to Phoenix all of next week for work. We will still be dropping a pod or pods. I don't know how many there will be, but we will be dropping it. I just hope I'm not in the air when it happens. But besides that, thank you for tuning in. 2 pods, back-to-back days. Look at us go. No off season for us, like we said. Please like, subscribe, comment, share. Do all that you do. We greatly appreciate it. Drop in the comments below. Who do you want as the next head coach of UCF? Do you agree with what we're saying? Do you not agree? Please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, really appreciate the support. It's going to be a fun month of December. We've got a lot of news that we're going to get to talk about. A lot of interviews that we're not ready to announce yet, that we are working on getting, that I think will be very enlightening for a lot of you UCF fans. So please stay on the lookout for that. And if you made it this long, this far, credit to you. You're a real one. All right, everybody. For Nick Geddes, I'm Sean Green. This has been Charge On, presented by Bet Online. We will see you when we see you.